Talk about a guy who should have a great weekend if he can make it to Omaha. We're sort of praying for him from that standpoint, and that's Mark Etheridge at d1baseball.com. Mark, kind of a planes, trains, and automobile situation unfolding for you as you make the quest out west.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Travis. This has been an unfortunate travel experience. Let me tell you, tried to fly to Dallas. We had mechanical failures in Dallas, and I missed my connection. All the flights, I guess because TCU is in the World Series, all the flights to Omaha today are booked. So I rented a car, and now I'm somewhere in Oklahoma and heading towards Omaha.
Oh, this is kind of the vacation version of the CWS.
Yeah, I mean,
you're Mark Griswold.
It's going to be awful if I get to Omaha and TD Ameritrade is closed for renovation. That's kind of the way this was going. But
it's going to
be a great week. We're supposed to have great weather, and it's going to be really hot. But it's not 100% humidity, so I think I'll survive.
Yeah, at this point, you have to be wondering if Marty Moose is the mascot for the CWS.
No doubt.
And you don't want a pre-recorded message from him outside the ballpark.
Sorry.
When you get there.
The Moose out front.
Park's closed. Moose out front should have told you. Oh, goodness. We certainly hope you make it there in one piece. It'll be worth it, Mark, once you get there. But as you head west, I know you do so with a lot of news breaking back to the south, at least.
Yeah.
As we expect later today that Greg Goff, head coach at Louisiana Tech, will be named as Mitch Gaspard's successor as the skipper at Alabama, at least. That's what we were expecting last night. Is that still the way you understand it, Mark?
Yeah. So from what people are telling me, that there's going to be a follow-up meeting this morning where they try to reach a final agreement. Whatever, there's some sticking point out there, one side or the other, that's important to them that prohibits a deal from being in place. But the hope is that they get that ironed out, and an announcement would be imminent at that point.
Someone is supposed to be announced as the new baseball coach later today. And
that's what I understand.
And so what we have heard at BamaOnline.com, I think is pretty much in line with what you guys have heard at D1 Baseball, is that an agreement in principle, at least, was thought to be in place. So could be an interesting afternoon, could go very smoothly for Alabama baseball. Talk about the process that Alabama went through to get to this point, and sort of your thoughts on how this went down and how it sort of relates to the perception previously, right or wrong, that baseball doesn't carry enough importance at the University of Alabama. Do you think the hiring was treated with the kind of respect you would think it deserves?
Well, over the years, Jim Wells was pretty outspoken about the lack of support that he felt the administration gave him, and Mitch certainly had some. He's not as outspoken, but he certainly had some misgivings about that as well. And that's the reputation in the baseball community is, it's a football school, and baseball is an afterthought, and for that matter, a lot of other sports are as well. But with the new stadium, there was hope that maybe some of that was changing, that all of the negativity and the lack of perceived support would flip. And there was an opportunity here with this hire to go out and really make a dent in the perception, and I really don't feel like that took place. I know that there were a lot of candidates who were interested, a lot of people who would be higher in the wish list than Greg Goff. No offense to him, but he doesn't have the track record that some of the other candidates who were interested did. And for whatever reason, Alabama couldn't get a deal done with those guys, and now they're really taking a flyer on a guy who has won wherever he's been, but there's really some doubt on whether he's ready for an SEC head coaching job. 2 years at Louisiana Tech and a few years at Campbell. He did great there, don't get me wrong, and he's an energetic guy. I think he's he's certainly someone who is well regarded. However, there were higher, we'll just say safer, more established candidates that I think could have been had if this would have been handled a little maybe smoother or differently. And sadly, that's because of that reputation, if anything, got worse with this hire. And that's, it's unfortunate for a program that's had so much success in one sport that across the country with everyone else, the other sports are viewed as an afterthought.
So the way you sort of see this, Mark, it didn't really line up with the path it appeared Alabama was going down based on the new facility and sort of the momentum from that. Yeah. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying fair. That? It just, the path didn't really seem to continue the way you thought it was headed. And I think a lot of people feel the same way, and not just people in the media, but the fan base as well. Taking the temperature of the fan base like I do, I think the overall perception right now is that if it is indeed Goff, it's a solid hire, but there's no splash. It's not the big cannonball, that produces the big splash that everyone was looking for. Now, it may be a deferred splash. He may come in here, win big, and sort of like Jim Wells. But initially, at least, I hear what you're saying. It's not maybe in line with where we thought things were going for the program.
Well, I think some would say that the facility, it had reached a point where they had to do something. It was embarrassing. And so they did that, and that's, good enough. And now be quiet again, and we'll call you when we're ready to talk to you. And that's sort of the impression that this whole process gives. And right or wrong, that's the impression.
And I think that's fair enough at this point. I again, as you said, I think it's a situation where if you go this route, and let me ask you this, with Cliff Godwin of ECU, do you think it ever did it get close with him, do you think? Or, he was obviously mentioned as another kind of co-favorite for the job here in the last day or so. Obviously, he's done a good job over there in North Carolina at ECU, but do you feel like it got fairly close with him too?
Yeah, there were some serious discussions from what we were told with him, and I think that he pulled out. So whatever he was looking for was not something that Alabama could live with. I don't know if what he's asking for is legitimate, but you have to think that if you're at East Carolina and you have an SEC background as an assistant like Godwin does, that this would be a pretty attractive job, and that you would be willing to maybe forego some things in your wish list to get in here. And the fact that you're turning down, Alabama, an SEC job with that beautiful ballpark, state-of-the-art facilities, to stay at East Carolina is not something that, if you're Alabama, makes you feel very proud.
So do you think in a situation like that, when a coach like Godwin, or maybe even an elite type head coach, looks at the job right now, is it you think it's more about salary or coaching staff pool?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. The other part is, with the lottery, with the lack of the non-resident or out-of-state tuition waivers that some of the other competitors in the SEC have, Alabama is behind the eight ball anyway. So if you're going to be at a disadvantage from a recruiting standpoint, you need something to flip those scales. And the ballpark is, that's a great step in the right direction. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But obviously there are other factors that are prohibiting Alabama from going out and getting the type of higher that that a program of this stature that it should be able to get. Again, nothing against Greg Goff. He may do great. He's just he's kind of down your list, and if you get to him, it means a lot of people that either you should have targeted and didn't, or you did target and they said no. That's how you get to him.
Yeah, and in fairness to Alabama, that may have very well been the case. May have gone to some other guys higher on the list, and perhaps even if salary was not so much an issue, there's still that 11.7 number sitting there.
Yeah.
And that one, I got to think, is just really hard to get past.
Yeah, you can't miss in recruiting.
Right.
You have injuries, you have guys that don't pan out, you have whatever attrition that you face, and if you don't do a great job of developing talent, which the past staff didn't really do, that's how you miss the NCAA tournament, and that's kind of where they are. And until someone comes in with a plan to mitigate that, that's where they're going to stay.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Talk about the College World Series, where we're hoping you make it in time for tomorrow's Game 1. We're thinking you're safe for UC Santa Barbara and Oklahoma State tomorrow.
Yeah.
I guess that's 2 p.m. Central first pitch. So
yeah,
we're thinking you'll get there.
I sure hope so. I've got reservations at the Drover tonight.
Oh, wow.
I'm hoping I get there in time for that. So
we'll take something to go if you get a chance. Bring it back.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing.
But look,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, it's really an odd field for me. 2 weeks ago we were thinking this was going to be the SEC tournament part 2, and it's not. Only Florida made it, and they had to go to a third game to do so. A lot of people went in thinking it was going to be this star-studded, Southern reunion, and instead you've got probably as many Cinderella stories as you do favorites, and it really changed the tenor of the tournament. And for that matter, it's really up in the air. Not only because you really only have Florida and Miami as teams that have been so good all year, but with the way that the favorites lost the last 2 weeks, you don't know who's good anymore. With the way that this has transpired the last couple of weeks, it's really thrown it up in the air. And like last year when Virginia was the hot team, they just snuck into the field as a 3 seed, went all the way to Omaha, and then won the thing. So it's not so much of who's the most talented team or who's the most accomplished. It's who's hot at the right time and who can get the breaks. And it really makes for an interesting series. But for guys like us to try to break it down, it's really a challenge because you really don't know who's going to be good from day to day now.
Yeah, if you're Florida and you make it out there and you draw Coastal Carolina, if you'd have told Kevin O'Sullivan, UF's head coach, that a couple weeks ago, privately at least, he might have felt pretty good about that matchup because it wasn't going to be LSU.
Right.
But you watch Coastal Carolina win 2 straight in Baton Rouge, and you think that's an SEC caliber club by a good bit.
Yeah, they can really swing it.
Yeah. 90-plus home runs, I guess, on the season. They remind me more of sort of an older school SEC team. So you're right. I want to say 5 of the 8 teams went on the road to basically get to the College World Series. You look at UC Santa Barbara going to Louisville, winning there. Oklahoma State just annihilated the state of South Carolina, going through Clemson and Columbia to get there. But looking specifically at Florida, you still have to think it sets up well for the Gators. Had to survive a pretty tough super against rival Florida State. But, man, you talk about a team with depth, especially in the pitching staff, Mark. Aren't they really built to win this thing?
You would think so. And I think the big thing for me is Logan Shore, who was the SEC Pitcher of the Year. It sort of scuffled a little bit late in the season, and he came out against Florida State in an elimination game, their backs against the wall, and he was just money. He really looked as good as he had all year, and he's going to start their opener. And if he's back, if he's the guy that they really want, they're not going to lose with him on the mound because he's probably not going to give up a run. So I think that's one thing. And then with Peter Alonso, who was injured with a broken hand and missed the SEC tournament, really about the last 3 weeks of the season, he has come back as a different hitter. He was a good hitter before. He's a great hitter now. He's pretty much unpitchable at this point. Doubles, home runs, all over the place. He really changes their lineup, which honestly is pretty pitchable, other than him. And J.J. Schwartz seems to be figuring it out a little bit in the postseason. He's been better, and with those two guys in the middle of the order, if they're hitting, I think the rest of the guys kind of feed off that, and it gives them that catalyst. That one guy that strikes fear in the pitching coach for the other side, and you have to pitch the other guys different because you definitely don't want to walk anybody in front of those two. So I think, for me, that's the key for Florida. If they want to go in and finally get that elusive championship that is, they've probably been the best team several times out here and haven't won it yet. And this year, certainly on paper, they're head and shoulders ahead of everybody on the mound and pretty close, from a lineup standpoint as well. So this is their year. It's set up for them now. With how Kevin O'Sullivan, how he was rumored to be in the mix for the Texas job. I mean, there was legitimate interest from what we told, and they decided they're going to do some facility upgrades, do some things for him in Gainesville. And this would be a great way to build on that momentum and help with the fundraising, so to speak, with a national title.
This much we know, Mark. It's Gators or bust for the SEC out in Omaha this time around, and it should be a lot of fun to watch play out. We'll let you get back to those hard miles.
Yeah.
And wish you safe travels on your way out to Omaha, Mark, and really appreciate you stepping in and joining us here on the Gary Harris Show and giving us some insight, not only into Alabama baseball and the potential new hire at the head coaching spot, but the College World Series as well. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Yep. Take care, Travis.